Hi, welcome to this video on the structure and properties of water for Cape Biology. Water is such a special compound in biology that CXC has given it its own topic under the syllabus. Now, because of water's structure and properties, it is essential to all living organisms. Each water molecule is composed of two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom, and these are covalently bonded, where each hydrogen atom shares an electron pair with the oxygen. Now, the bond angle here is 104.5 degrees, which is because the non-bonding orbitals of the oxygen very slightly compress the orbitals shared by the hydrogen, which causes the bond to be just short of the 109.5 of our perfect adhesion. As a whole compound, water is electrically neutral, but what happens is that the sharing of electrons is uneven. Oxygen is greedier than hydrogen. Oxygen has a greater desire for electrons than hydrogen, which is why we refer to oxygen as being highly electronegative. Oxygen is more electronegative than the hydrogen atoms, so what happens is that there's a weak negative charge on the oxygen and weak positive charge on the hydrogen. These are illustrated here. Now, that kind of separation of charge due to the uneven sharing of electrons, that's called a dipole. Because of that same separation of charge, water is referred to as polar. It has partial positive and partial negative regions in its compound. Being polar, water is able to form hydrogen bonds between its molecules. So what you'll have, as in this diagram, is a partial positive hydrogen here, forming a hydrogen bond with a partial negative oxygen here. So water is therefore able to form hydrogen bonds with adjacent molecules because of its polarity. Now, when these hydrogen bonds are present in large numbers, they form a very strong structure. As for the physical properties of water, they differ from other substances. First, water is an excellent solvent. Since water is polar, ions like sodium and chloride and covalently bonded substances that are polar, like glucose, are able to dissolve in it. Remember, we said earlier that water has partial positive and partial negative regions. Now, what happens when water molecules surround charged particles like those ions or like those regions of the polar covalent substances is that the partial positive ends of the water are attracted to the negatively charged regions and vice versa. As you can see in this diagram here, you're going to have your positive sodium ion and the negative oxygen, which carries a partial negative charge, are attracted to it. The opposite happens for the chloride ion. It's negative, so therefore the hydrogens with the partial positive charge are going to be attracted to it. What that means is that the surrounded molecules are able to break apart. So for example, NaCl, sodium chloride, will break into sodium ions and chloride ions. And this allows chemical reactions to occur in cell. Additionally, dissolved solutes are more reactive when they're free to move about. It's much easier for them rather than being locked in their 3D lattice structure, as is the case for sodium chloride. Now, water's property as an excellent solvent also allows metabolites to be transported efficiently. For example, blood plasma is composed of 90% water and 10%, for example, blood plasma. It's 90% water and the other 10% is just substances dissolved in that water. So, the first property of water, it is an excellent solvent because it has partial positive and partial negative ends, i.e., it's polar. Next, water has a high surface tension. Surface tension causes a liquid surface to act kind of like a stretched elastic membrane. It contracts as much as possible. Next to mercury, water has the highest surface tension of any known liquid, which is about 73 millinewtons per meter. Surface tension is a manifestation of that hydrogen bond that we looked at earlier. Those molecules at the surface are very strongly attracted to the water molecules immediately below them. Because of that, water has a high surface tension. Due to that surface tension, water serves as a habitat for Newton, which are just animals that live on the surface of the water. Their weight is not enough to penetrate the surface. For example, these insects in the diagram are commonly called water skaters, and they are able to walk on water because of its high surface tension. Next, water has cohesive and adhesive properties. Hydrogen molecules between water molecules, Hydrogen bonds between water molecules allow for strong cohesion, which just means that the water molecules attract each other. Water is also able to form hydrogen bonds with other molecules, and that's adhesion. So cohesion means that water molecules attract each other. Adhesion means that they are able to form bonds or are attracted to other molecules. The forces of adhesion and cohesion within a body of water and between water and its surroundings means that it flows very easily. Water molecules pull other water molecules along due to cohesion, and they adhere to the side of a vessel due to adhesion. And we see this when you look at the xylem. The cohesive and adhesive forces of water play roles in many important water based processes, such as the movement of water in xylem and the draining of tears from tear ducts. Next, water has a relatively high specific heat capacity of about 4,184 joules per kilogram per Kelvin. Now, this high value means that water can take in a lot of heat energy without changing temperature. Remember, specific heat capacity is how much heat a substance needs to raise 1 kilogram of that substance by 1 degree Celsius or 1 Kelvin. And if water has a high specific heat capacity, that means it needs a lot of heat energy to raise 1 kilogram by 1 degree Celsius. So, what that means is that water can take in a lot of energy without it changing temperature. And that's very important to living organisms. They contain 60 to 70% water, so they can take in a lot of heat energy without having their body temperatures change very much, which is especially useful to organisms in extreme temperatures. Further, aquatic organisms do not experience extreme fluctuations in the temperatures of their environment because the temperatures of large bodies of water do not change greatly, again, due to that specific heat capacity. Water also has a relatively high specific latent heat of vaporization of about 3.3 times 10 to the 6 joules per kilogram. A lot of heat energy is needed to change liquid water to steam because of its hydrogen bonds. Now, specific latent heat of vaporization, on the other hand, just refers to how much heat is needed to convert 1 kilogram of a substance from liquid to gas without changing its temperature. And because water has a high because water has a high specific latent heat of vaporization, it means that you need a lot of heat energy to change liquid water into steam. And that's useful because when water evaporates from an organism, like when you sweat after a race, or like plants in transpiration, a lot of heat energy is removed. Water has a maximum density of 4 degrees Celsius, which means that it is less dense when solid. Now, when you cool down water, let's say you have water at 30 degrees, if you cool it down to 4 degrees, it will contract and become denser. However, if you cool it below 4 degrees, it will expand and it will continue to expand until it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. So that means that solid ice at 0 degrees Celsius is less dense than liquid ice. This causes the solid ice to float on the surface of the liquid. For example, in lakes, ice formed at the surface and denser, warmer water is below the surface, which means that aquatic organisms can survive in very cold environments, like in winter. Water also has some additional properties. It buffers the cells from the dangerous effects of acids and bases, and it's very reactive because it splits to form hydrogen and hydroxide, which is useful in photosynthesis, respiration, and hydrolysis reactions. Finally, water is incompressible, as the hydrogen bonds hold the molecules together, which facilitates turgidity in plant cells and hydrostatic skeletons in animals like worms.